All right. We're in the 17th chapter of Revelation. Now, last week we kind of took a little sidestep and we talked about the false prophet, the false church during the tribulation, and the situation that we may find ourselves in as questioning our salvation and things of that. I hope that you got something out of that, not from me, but from the scriptures, some assurances for that, so that if those times come, you're not, concerned about them because the Lord gives you a promise there. But we're back in the 17th chapter this morning. Remember when we started this chapter a couple of weeks ago, we began by seeing one of the angels, one of the seven angels who had the seven final bowls or vials that are going to be poured out on the earth, had come and talked to John and had told him that he's going to show John what a lot of this stuff means, because some of it is confusing, and John was confused and he wasn't sure about some of the things he was seeing. And so he's going to clarify a lot of that for him, and we'll see that as we go through it. And he spoke about the woman riding the beast and the kings and the seven hills and the crown or on the forehead of the woman, whether it be a tattoo or a crown or a sign, I don't know which, but it says, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. This is the religious system in place, okay? This is not necessarily. Now, we're talking about two different things, and I want you to be clear on this. Chapter 17 deals with Babylon, the religious system. Chapter 18 is going to deal with Babylon, the location on, planet Earth. And so kind of try to keep that in mind. It'll make it a little bit more understandable for you. But we're talking about the religious system, the system that's been put in place by Satan using the false prophet and, of course, his cohort, the Antichrist, and those kind of things. Now, we get down to verse 8. We actually stopped on 11, but we're going to go back to 8 and pick up from there, because we not only are going to see the woman in the first part of this chapter, we're going to see the beast that she's riding, and that begins in verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they should behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. So he begins in verse 8 is referring to the Antichrist. We've talked about this some previously, but he's talking about, or the identification of this beast is the Antichrist. And then in verse 9, the 7 heads are 7 mountains. Some believe that those are the 7 world governments from Israel's point of view that ruled over them, starting with Egypt, and then Babylon, or Syria, and then Babylon, then the Medo-Persians, and the Greeks, and the Romans, and then eventually the Antichrist. Others believe it refers to a geographical location, being 7 mountains, where this seat of harlotry is, or abomination, as the scripture calls it, is located. And you can read several different theologians, people who study this stuff, and they do not all agree on that. So I can't tell you for sure which it means. Either, I can see either way it could affect, or could be referencing to either one. But as far as exactly which one, we don't know. I'm of the opinion, and this is just my opinion, that this is one of those things that's not going to be known until the tribulation starts. I don't think that's really our for us to understand all the details of this, but the people during the tribulation will understand it. Now, that may be true, it may not be. That didn't cost any extra. All right. And so then we get to the verse 10 about the 7 kings. Those are the from John's point of view at the time he wrote this, there were 5 previous empires over Israel. The one that was currently there was the Roman Empire, and then the one to come will be the false prophet. And then we get to verse 11, and that's where we actually start today. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goes into perdition. Now, that can be confusing, but we have to go back and look at some of the other stuff we've already talked about. When he talks about he is of the 7, that is, again, a reference to the Antichrist, who will gain power during the tribulation. But from the way that we can put the scriptures together, whether it comes from Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, John, or Peter, or other writers, it seems that initially the Antichrist is going to have a leadership role over a portion of the earth before he becomes the world leader. And it seems the portion that he's going to be ruling is going to be probably the Middle East, including Israel. Now, what does he do during the time of the first 3.5 years, concerning Israel and the Arab nations? Somehow or other, he brokers a peace agreement with them, because Israel is allowed to rebuild the temple where? Right where the mosque sits today. Now, you know, if that happened today, there would be a war. If any Jew does anything to that Golden Dome mosque, that's all they need to start a war. But somehow, some way, during his leadership time, and again, I believe he'll be kind of the Middle East ruler in the beginning, that he's going to be able to broker a peace agreement, and the Jews are going to be able to rebuild the temple. And then, of course, he's going to turn on them, and he'll no longer protect them like he was in the first 3.5 years. He will proclaim himself God in the temple, will defile it, will desecrate it, and cause the Jews to pull away from him. So he said that, verse 11 there, the beast was and is not. Now, what happens to him near the midpoint of the tribulation, to the Antichrist? He gets a fatal head wound and recovers from it. Whether he actually dies or not, speculation, but it doesn't matter. He appears to be dead. The world believes him to be dead, and he comes back to life. And so that is what it's referring to when he said he is not. And then it says even he is the 8th, but he is of the 7. He was the 7th ruling Israel, but now the 8th means he becomes the world ruler. So that's the expansion of his power and authority in the second half of the tribulation period. And when he comes, he will continue a short space. The maximum amount of time he's going to be in power is 7 years. In world power, the maximum, absolute maximum, 3.5 years. And then what's going to happen to him? Verse 11 says he goes into perdition. He'll be cast into the lake of fire. The false prophet and the Antichrist will be the 2 first occupants of the lake of fire. Now, when people die today, they go to Hades, which is the torment prior to the final judgment, which is the great white throne judgment for the lost. Then they are cast into the lake of fire. These 2 guys go immediately. They get there 1,000 years before anybody else. They get to pick which house they want to live in, or whatever. But anyhow, there is no air conditioning, so, they won't be comfortable by any means. All right. Then look at verse 12. He says that, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet. So this is a future thing he's showing to John, that there's going to be 10 kings. Now, they may be 10 kings who rule the world in a regional sense. If the Antichrist rules the Middle East, then maybe somebody rules North America, somebody South America, I don't know. Other theologians believe that this is dealing with 10 Middle Eastern countries. And all this is focused right in the Middle East and is not necessarily, although some of it is, but not necessarily relating to a worldwide situation. Again, I can't tell you. I don't know the definitive answer for that. But it very likely is could be either one or both at the same time. Now, he says he have received no kingdom as yet, but they're going to receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Do you think that's a literal time frame? I don't think so. I think it's a period of time, but it's a very short period of time. So what may happen is that they become the leaders of a particular section of the Middle East or a particular section of Europe or the world or whatever. And after a short period of time, they're going to relinquish their power and voluntarily give it to the Antichrist, and then he becomes the world leader at that point. So, he's giving him a lot of information here, but he's giving him a pretty broad brush approach to it with not a lot of details. And again, we don't know for sure how all this plays out. But look at verse 13. He says, these have one mind, and they shall give their power and their strength to the beast. Now, we would wonder, what is the one mind that they have? What is the one single purpose that they're all dedicated to? What is it that we're concerned about here? What are they concerned about? Well, I'm sorry?
The destruction of Israel.
Destruction of Israel? Okay. So let's take a look at some of that and see if we can figure out what's going on. They have one mind and shall give their power and strength to the beast. Now, it could mean that they are of one mind to give up their authority to the beast. It could mean that they're of one mind to destroy Israel. But remember, Israel is most likely under the power and the authority at this point of the Antichrist. So why would they want to destroy Israel if they're going to give him their power? So, I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Yeah. Yeah.
In reading this, the 10 kings, instead of it being 10 kingdoms, which that will be incorporated, but have you heard or thought about, are these 10 men? Because we know now, we've got people like Soros and Schwab, and there are a handful of men that really run the world now.
I think with that question is 10 men, but those 10 men have power over an area, whatever that area is, whether it's a Arabic country or a continent or whatever. But yeah, there's 10 individuals that are at work here.
Yeah, because we see that model now. There's men that
Oh,
are
yeah.
running things. And then this was just a reminder, I just watched a video over the weekend. You were mentioning the Dome of the Rock. It just came out in Jerusalem News where they were talking about how they're even more ready now to build the temple because they're ready for peace and harmony. And there are discussions to share the Temple Mount with the Muslims. So,
Which tells us what? Which tells us what? We're that far
yeah.
from the rapture.
And this was in Jerusalem.
Yeah. So, some people get the idea, or at least I think some people get the idea, that the rapture is going to happen. and like if it's today, it's going to happen today, then tomorrow, all this stuff's going to start happening. Now, there's going to be some preamble to that. It's going to start before the rapture, but then after the rapture happens, then it becomes falling into place and actually, coming about. So, they're always talking about peace in the Middle East. And how long does that normally last? Anywhere from a couple of minutes to, 30 minutes or something, but maybe a little bit longer. But the thing about it is a topic. And one of these days, when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he actually will be able to broker a peace agreement between the Arab nations and Israel. But until that happens, it's going to be just like it is now. It's going to be things that get broken very easily, truces that are disregarded, whatever. All right? So when it talks about the 10 kings having one mind, and they give their power and strength to the beast, that may be the answer to the question. That is their one mind, to give up their sovereignty to a degree. They'll still be kind of like his underlings, I think, but they're going to say, okay, instead of me being the big dog or trying to be the big dog, we're going to let him be the big dog, and we'll be the little pups running around here, making sure we do everything he wants done.
I don't think they put all the power could be put in all their army and resources for him.
Sure. You combine all the nation's wealth, you combine the nation's armies, you combine the nation's industrial complexes and all those kind of things. He'll be over all of that, and they'll all work in concert with each other.
What is the percentage of non-Christian religions around the world?
I have no idea. But it's considerably more than Christians.
Than Christians.
Yes, absolutely. And you have to be careful when you say Christian religion. There are religions who identify as Christian, but yet they've got some pretty weird ideas. And Jesus is not the, Son of God, or, maybe there's other things that they throw in there. And remember what John said when we started working with the Revelation. If you take a word out or put a word in or change a punctuation mark, it's no longer the truth. And then it becomes a false doctrine. Paraphrasing, obviously. So maybe verse 13 answers itself. Their one mind is to give their power over to the beast, which causes him to become the world leader.
Well, I was thinking that because of what it says in 14.
Okay.
If it's that quick, they're giving their power to him. Was their whole intention at that point to make war with the Lamb?
Okay. Now, when it says, and let's look at verse 14, it says, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. Now, what are we talking about? What is the war with the Lamb? It's Armageddon. Okay. This is after the Lord comes back to earth. So this is at the end of the 3.5 year period, which is the second part of the tribulation, called the Great Tribulation. So when we get to that period of time, that the very last few days, if you will, of the Great Tribulation, then they are united under one leader, and that leader, being the Antichrist, is going to use their resources and them as the means to try to overcome Christ once he returns to earth. Now, if you look back into World War II, you had a lot of different countries, England, the United States, Australia, and all that, who were allies, but who was the commander-in-chief? Who was the supreme commander? Eisenhower. Now, he was the general of the army for the United States, but all the others took their orders from him because he was considered to be the leader. Now, that's just kind of give you I'm not saying he was the Antichrist, don't get me wrong. That's just trying to give you an idea of what the power structure may look like when this happens. They're not giving up their power totally. They're just saying, we'll let you call the shots, but we'll carry out your what you decide to do. These shall make, verse 14, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. So we know that Jesus is going to win. There's no question about that. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Who is that?
Saved.
That's us. That's us. That's the people who are saved at the time of the rapture, who are called up to be with him, and those who died during the tribulation after having made a profession of faith and accepting him and have died. And so we come back with him when he comes back to earth. And he's going to come to a particular location. Where's that?
On the mountain.
Coming to the Mount of Olives. Where's the Mount of Olives? It's on the east side of Jerusalem. You can stand on the Mount of Olives and see over into Jerusalem. In fact, Jesus did that on many occasions, and on one occasion, he looked on Jerusalem and said, basically, why won't you accept me? If I would have taken you in and like a mother hen and her chicks, but you rejected me. And so he's coming back. He's coming back to the Mount of Olives, and then he will be ruler as Lord of lords and King of kings. And to attain that, he's going to destroy all of these armies of all the world that have all congregated together. Now, why have they congregated together initially? Did they know when he's coming back? How could they know? We don't even know. All right. So they didn't know he's coming back. So why are they gathering together initially there in the Valley of Megiddo, anticipating their attack on Jerusalem, wherever that is, somewhere down here on this map? Good gracious. Why can't I find Jerusalem? There it is, right down here. And where's the Valley of Megiddo? Right up here. So this is the staging area. Napoleon said it's the most perfect staging area for armies that was ever discovered on the planet Earth. And so, I'm sorry?
You said Napoleon?
Napoleon said that, yeah. And there have been many armies who have come that way to attack Jerusalem. Babylonians came through there. The Assyrians came through there. Even as late as World War II, the British went through there when they were fighting in that area. And in fact, if you go there, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's called Gateway of the Nations, I believe. There is a stone there that has engraved in it the names of conquerors who have come through that path. There's a pass there that you go through, and it's engraved with the names of those and those armies that they led. And
I read something, you were saying gates. There's a scripture, and I can't remember where it's at, in the Bible, talking about that at the end times, their gates will be shut down and they're locked. And China is currently building like these islands along the strait that goes along through there, and they're going to have their own gates where they'll be able to block any kind of shipping or anything that comes through there. And so they'll actually control the passage for any kind of transport or anything, military or anything that goes through.
where at?
South China
Where?
Sea. South China Sea. We're building a man-made island.
Okay.
Yeah,
South
they're gonna
China.
have gates that they'll be able to control any kind of passage or
Well,
anything that comes
South
through.
China Sea is nowhere near this.
I know, but it
Yeah.
has to do with the straits and stuff. They'll be able to control. It's not just in the South China Seas. They're going to be doing it in other places as well.
Okay.
But that just made me.
They're trying to get control of the Suez Canal
Yeah.
down in South America too.
Really? Okay. Didn't know that, but
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me. Not in the least.
Worldwide.
So why have they gathered? Why have these countries gathered in this area to attack Jerusalem before the Lord returns? They don't know he's coming. They don't know when he's coming. but they must have another purpose. They have an ulterior motive.
Is it because the Jewish people, he desecrated their temple and is scared of a rebellion there?
Okay? There's been a rift between the Antichrist and the Jews because he's claiming to be the Messiah and they're not accepting that. What else might be? I'm looking for it, that's why I'm hesitating. I never write down the stuff I should write down.
Maybe they think it's,
Uh,
they can stop Jesus' return by taking control of the temple.
No, I don't think Jesus is any concern of theirs at this point because they don't know when he's coming, just like we don't know. Nobody knows. Only the Father knows. That's what he told them. I cannot believe I can't find that verse. Let me paraphrase it to you. The 10 kings are going to attack Jerusalem. Now, why are they going to attack Jerusalem? Because the false prophet, the false religion, has been centered there. And not only that, but that becomes the central point or the controlling point of, or not Jerusalem necessarily, but under the leadership of the false prophet becomes the, under the great domain of commerce. And in chapter 18, when we get to chapter 18, we're going to see this because when Babylon is destroyed, we're going to find out that there is, over in verse 12, about all the merchandise of chapter 18, starting in verse 12, 13, 14, all the merchandise that went through there, how they got rich by it, and the merchants of these things were made rich by her, and they stand far off and for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. That's verse 15 of chapter 18. But they're going to attack Jerusalem because of the fact that there's still a remnant of God's people there, and they are not following the Antichrist. They're rebelling against him, and so they're going to basically, their reasoning is to annihilate them. What will happen when they get there? Look back over in Zechariah if you want to. That's the next to the last book in the Old Testament. Comes right before Malachi. Look at Zechariah chapter 14. And verse 1 is the beginning. Zechariah 14:1. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. Now, they gather because they think they're doing the will of the Antichrist, who is doing the will of Satan, but who are they really being controlled by? God. Did God not control Pharaoh when Moses was trying to get him to let the people go? He controls the ungodly just like he does the godly, or uses them for his purposes. So he says in verse 2 of Zechariah 14, I will gather all nations. These are all the nations of the world to battle, and the city shall be taken. This is Jerusalem. And the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. So what's going to happen is they're going to gather, they're going to invade Jerusalem. Jerusalem is going to be, portions of it are going to be taken captive. Portions of it, the people will be killed. Portions of it, they will be able to, create maybe a compound of a green zone sort of safety to some degree. And then the Lord's going to come back and fight the battle for them. So that's how things are going to work out there at that point in time. Now, if you go back to chapter 17, verse 1, where we are today in chapter 17, And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying, Come unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sits upon the many waters. All of this leads up to the destruction of the Babylonian religious system. Not the commercial system, the religious system. We'll see the commercial system in chapter 18, and it's going to be something different. All right? I hope I'm not losing you on this. And again, I don't know all the details of everything, but I'm trying to give you, at least what I understand it to be. All right, verse 15 then of chapter 17 says, And he saith unto me, now this is the angel talking to John. He's going to give him some clarification. Remember, he talked about the beast, or the woman, and the waters, and mention of waters and things of that nature. Well, here's the explanation for that in verse 15. And he saith unto me, The waters which you saw where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So it is a representative term. It is not talking about a sea or a pool of water or an ocean or anything of that nature. It's talking about people, about the people who are inhabiting the earth at that time. And specifically who he's talking about, because of the nature of the woman, he's talking about the lost people, the people who are following the Antichrist, the people who have made a commitment to follow him and the false prophet, and not the true and living God, not Jesus Christ, not the true Messiah. But yet there are going to be a lot of people saved during the tribulation. We don't want to forget that. And there's going to be a lot of Jews who are going to come to the realization of who the Messiah really was 2,000 plus years ago. So they will make that determination and realization, and then they will turn their lives over to the Lord. But they're going to be the target for the entire world. You know how big Israel is. It's like 3 or 4 counties in Texas, and the whole world is against them. You ever think about that? What have they done for the whole world to be mad at them? Well, they have the Savior. They're his chosen people. Sandy?
Way back there in the Old Testament, God said you should be hated of all nations for my sake.
Yeah.
It's not that Israel's done anything. It's because they hate God.
Yeah. And what did he tell Abram when he made the promise to him? He said, if you'll leave where you're at and come over here where I'm not going to tell you where you're going, I'll make you a great people. And you'll be great throughout all the world. And then he says, basically predicts that Jesus Christ will come through his lineage of his children, one of his children. So, or actually through one of Jacob's children, but they're all tied back to Abram or Abraham. So anyway, verse 16 begins to give us some insight, verse 15 into that these are people he's talking about, not oceans or seas or bodies of water or anything of that nature. Now, they physically attack the false religion. These armies do. And they do it in, basically. Mankind, and it's kind of ironic in a way, but not when you consider God. It's ironic that the people who followed after this and who supported this and who, allowed this to happen, this false religion to take over the world, they're the ones who destroy it. So God uses even the unsaved or the lost to do his will many times. And it's not going to be an easy, transition. They're not going to say, now, if y'all don't lay down your arms, if y'all don't behave yourself, we're going to come in and take over. No, they're going to go in and killing and burning and destroying. And so the idea is going to be total annihilation or captivity. There are going to be people in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Israel, taken captive and made slaves of. You know, now slavery is kind of a term we think happened way back yonder, but it's still in the world today, and it's not going away until the Lord comes. And so Israel is going to find part of herself becoming a slave nation or serving the nations of the world because of slavery. All right. Now, let me find where I'm at here.
16.
Verse 17, thank you. All right, verse 17. It says, "For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will." They think they're working for the Antichrist. The Antichrist is working for Satan. Satan thinks he's got the plan. It's actually God's plan. Even Satan can't, trump what God wants to do or what he plans to do. Think about it. Remember back to the book of Job. And we know about Job's trials and tribulations and the problems he had, and he lost all of his wealth, he lost all of his children, his wife, started nagging him more than she had before. A lot of that's not stopped yet, but anyway, the thing about it was none of that would have happened except for what? Satan had to go to God and get permission to do it. He couldn't just do it on his own. He doesn't have the power to overcome God's will. And this is all God's doing, pulling all this together. Satan thinks he's pulling it together and doing a good job, that he's going to annihilate Israel. And what's going to end up happening is, at the end of the Battle of Armageddon, then the political system of the Antichrist will crumble. And the political system of the entire world will crumble. And the Lord will become King of Kings and Lord of Lords and rule the world. But up until that point, Satan has to be allowed to do things, and he has convinced people. Remember how he convinced them? There were the frogs, and the frogs of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And they went to the kings of the world, and they convinced them to unite. I think that was back in chapter 16. I know y'all remember all that because we talked about it, so I don't have to worry about that. But anyway, Satan cannot do anything unless the Lord allows it. And so he's going to allow this to happen. Verse 17, "For God put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God should be fulfilled." These are the words of God that will be fulfilled. We're reading them in Revelation. But it's all going to come about. And when else in the whole history of the world has all the world been of one agreement, in one mind? Never. There's always somebody that's not in agreement with them. But in this situation, every nation on earth is going to gather together against Israel. And the end result we'll find out in chapter 19, which we're not there yet. And then verse 18, he says, "The woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." Now this is the city that we're going to see in chapter 18. But in verse 18, it's referring to the system that is worldwide, but this is the seat of that system. This is going to be the seat of the false prophet's church, if you will, for lack of a better term. So we're starting to see things gel together for the end here. And chapter 18 is going to give us some more detail about this. But up to this point, let me give you just kind of an idea of what we've seen at least from my viewpoint. Now, you may not agree with me, and that's okay. I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box, y'all know that, and I may have gotten some things out of pocket, but just think about the series of events. We're going to see the Antichrist, I believe, to be the ruler of the Middle Eastern countries, including Israel, in the beginning of the tribulation. We're going to see the false prophet establish the false church and the false doctrines and what becomes known as the great whore, the mystery, the abomination. And that is going to be the seat of power for the Antichrist also. But now who's going to really be running the show in the beginning? The false prophet. Remember what we saw back here in the beginning of chapter 17? Who was riding who? The woman, the false religious system, was riding the beast. The beast was subjected to her. Now, what kind of power does she have? Now, there's an alliance between them, obviously, but what kind of power does the false prophet have at the beginning of this? Not only religious power, but also economic power. What happens if you don't accept the false teachings of the false prophet and follow after that?
You can't shop.
You cannot buy, you cannot sell. You're going to starve, you're going to be rejected from medical treatment. You know, you can't buy or sell anything. You're going to be on your own. So he's going to have great power in that respect. Then as we go along, we see the Antichrist become or claim to be the Messiah and go into the temple and will desecrate it. And then the Jews, because of that desecration, will fall out of favor with him, and he will fall out of favor with them. And they're going to flee to the mountains to get away from him. And then we see that the rulers of the earth, or the 10 kings, began to revolt against this religious system. Now, the religious system, the false prophet, and the Antichrist are partners in this with Satan, but there begins to be a chink in the armor. And why is that? Probably because when the Antichrist says, I'm the Messiah, I am God, he's taking some of the authority, some of the power, some of the prestige and all that away from the Antichrist, from the false prophet. And the kings are going to attack the false prophet, attack the religious system, and literally destroy it. So that leaves the false prophet with not much power. But the Antichrist becomes the supreme power then. But they're still working in concert together. So the false prophet is relegated to second place. And then Jerusalem is attacked, as we read there in Zechariah 14. And during that attack, a day or a week or a month into it, we don't know how long, Jesus will return, and then he will fight the battle of Armageddon. And so the religious system is going to fall. Ultimately, the political system will fall when he defeats the Antichrist. Every other world leader is there at the Battle of Armageddon with their armies, and they're all destroyed and defeated. So who's left to run the world? Nobody. Jesus takes over. He becomes King of Kings at that point. The entire time frame for that to happen is 3.5 years from the beginning or the middle of the tribulation to the end of the tribulation. And where it fits in exactly is not clear in every situation. We don't always know. But in chapter 18, we're going to see the fall of the commercial system, which is headed by the false prophet. And we're going to see the devastation that occurs when it happens. The religious system is destroyed by man, but the commercial system is going to be destroyed by the Lord.
They've already had a test run with COVID as far as controlling what people can do. And the Netherlands and another country are talking about developing already these chips that go into your hand or whatever. to where you don't have to have a card and they can control everything you do.
They're not talking about it, they're doing it.
Well,
It's already,
it's happening.
yeah. You bet. Okay, thank you. But yeah, it's happening. You can already have this implant, and it's about the size of a grain of rice, and they know everything about you. All your medical history, your financial history, you know, where you live, who you reference, who your relatives are and all that. And if you try to remove it, once you put it in, it will release a toxin and kill you. And that's on the market in Europe right now. And, you know, I mean, the stuff that y'all have brought up this morning that you've heard about on the news or read about, that's the preamble to all of this stuff. And that means the rapture is not far away. We know people who need to hear about the Lord. We know people who need to make a decision for the Lord. We need to be talking to those folks and showing them and helping them understand now is the day of salvation, not a year from now, because a year from now we may not be here. A day from now we may not be here. It's all in place. There's nothing that has to be done that hasn't been done to stop the rapture from happening. It could happen at any moment. Okay? Don't worry about who gets elected president in the next year or so. You better worry about is the Lord coming back and where am I standing when he gets here. Okay? All right, we'll pick up on chapter 18 next week. Thank you for being here, and let's stand and be dismissed. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that.